My husband faked his GPS location for 6 months to cheat, so I used his toll data to destroy his entire life. I stood in the freezing shadows of our suburban driveway with a roll of heavy-duty packing tape clamped between my teeth, carefully affixing a 24-inch, high-gloss printed heat map to the steering wheel of my husband's running SUV. The engine purred a low, steady rhythm in the quiet twilight of our cul-de-sac, the exhaust pluming into the cold March air, while right in the center of his dashboard sat the physical manifestation of his utter betrayal. I am a senior mobile architect and a 3D developer. My entire professional existence is governed by zero-latency precision, flawless execution, and airtight code. I build systems that don't fail, applications that don't crash, and structures that operate entirely on logic. But for the last 6 months, my husband, Zaid, had been treating our marriage like a sloppy beta test, assuming I lacked the administrative privileges to audit his lies. Zaid is a corporate strategist for a massive downtown logistics firm. He is a man who speaks in buzzwords, who wears $3,000 Tom Ford suits, and who considers a conversation a negotiation. Since October of last year, his favorite corporate buzzword had been the grind. He had been aggressively angling for a massive Q1 promotion, a vice presidency that he claimed required him to sacrifice his evenings, his weekends, and essentially, his presence in our home. Every single Wednesday and Friday, like clockwork, he was allegedly tethered to his mahogany desk in the city until 10 p.m. I can still smell the stale scent of his deception. He would drag himself through our front door just before midnight, loosening his silk tie with a theatrical sigh, dropping his leather briefcase onto the hardwood floor with a heavy thud. "I'm dying, Miriam," he groaned one Friday in late January, collapsing onto our kitchen island while I reheated a plate of chicken piccata I had made hours earlier. "The board is bleeding me dry." We were staring at merger projections until my eyes physically burned. I've been surviving on office coffee and cold pizza since noon. I placed the warm plate in front of him and rested my hand on his shoulder. I felt the tension in his muscles. "You need to set boundaries, Zaid. This promotion isn't worth a heart attack." He reached up, grabbed my hand, and looked at me with those deep, earnest brown eyes that had convinced me to marry him 4 years ago. "It's for us, baby," he whispered, kissing my knuckles. "Once Q1 wraps, the bonus clears, and we get our lives back. I just need you to hold the fort down a little longer. Can you do that for me?" I smiled. I kissed his forehead. I washed his dishes while he went upstairs to shower. I swallowed the rising knot of loneliness in my throat because I believed him. I believed every single syllable of his exhausted, corporate martyr routine. Today is Tuesday, March 31st, 2026. Q1 is officially over. And as the CFO of our household, I sat down at my massive 3-monitor workstation at 9 a.m. to perform my end-of-month financial reconciliation. I like numbers. Numbers do not possess the capacity to lie. They do not gaslight you. They do not hold your hand and look into your eyes and manipulate your empathy. They simply exist in a binary state of truth or falsehood. Usually, I just skim the shared credit card statements, categorize our joint expenses, and move the surplus into our high-yield savings. But this morning, a minor discrepancy caught my eye. It wasn't a charge on our Amex. It was a subtle, automated withdrawal from our shared checking account to replenish our Ezpass electronic toll account. The auto-replenish usually triggered once every 2 months for a flat $50. But this month, it had triggered 3 times. $150 in automated tolls. I felt a cold, sharp prickle at the base of my neck. A microscopic compiling error in the pristine code of my domestic life. I opened a new tab, logged into the State Transit Authority's archaic, clunky web portal, and pulled the raw CSV data for our shared transponder. I dragged the file into my own database software to clean up the formatting. As the rows and columns populated across my vertical monitor, my breath hitched in my throat. There was a massive, aggressive surge in bridge toll expenses. But it wasn't just the sheer volume of the charges that made the blood drain from my face. It was the latency. The timestamps. Zaid and I shared our Google Maps, timeline, locations with each other. He suggested it a year ago for safety, claiming he wanted to know I made it to the gym and back when I went running late at night. Whenever I missed him on those lonely Wednesday and Friday nights, I would sometimes open the app just to see his little circular icon resting safely at the GPS coordinates of his downtown office building. I grabbed my iPhone. I opened his location history for the previous Friday. Google Maps showed his device stationary at his office from 8 a.m. to 10:45 p.m. I looked back at my monitor. The Ezpass raw data told a vastly different story. According to the State Toll Authority, the physical transponder, which was permanently glued to the windshield of Zaid's Audi SUV, crossed the northbound toll bridge out of the city at exactly 6:02 p.m. My vision narrowed. The edges of my home office blurred into a dark tunnel. I felt the heat rising in my neck, a slow, crawling fire that settled behind my eyes. I immediately recognized the architecture of his deception. Zaid wasn't a developer, but he was tech-savvy enough to browse a Reddit forum. He had installed a GPS spoofer on his phone. He was manually overriding his device's location services to broadcast a fixed coordinate, his office desk, to Google servers. He thought he was a genius. He thought he had engineered the perfect alibi. But my brilliant, strategic husband had forgotten one critical, inescapable physical variable in his equation: the automated license plate readers. The ALPR cameras mounted on the steel girders of the northbound bridge do not care about the GPS coordinates your phone is broadcasting. They capture physical, high-resolution infrared images of your front bumper and scan your transponder at 65 miles per hour. He was spoofing his software, but he couldn't spoof the hardware. My hands began to shake over my mechanical keyboard. The click-clack of the keys sounded like gunshots in the quiet house as I wrote a quick Python script to filter the 6 months of Ezpass data by frequency and timestamp. I needed to see the loop. I needed to understand the architecture of his betrayal. The script finished executing in less than 2 seconds. I stared at the output, feeling my stomach violently drop into my shoes. It was a recursive pattern. Flawless. Systemic. Every single Wednesday. Every single Friday. For 24 weeks. Outbound, crossing the northbound toll bridge at exactly 6:02 p.m. Inbound, crossing back southbound into the city limits at exactly 1:15 a.m. 48 trips. I didn't cry. I didn't reach for a tissue. The pain was too immense, too suffocating for tears. Instead, a hyper-focused, terrifying calm washed over me. The kind of calm that precedes a catastrophic system failure. But hold on, because that wasn't even the sickest part. That wasn't the detail that made me want to rip the drywall down with my bare hands. I needed to know the destination. The pings didn't just end at the bridge. The transit authority logs track which exit the transponder utilizes to leave the highway system. I took the exit node data and fed it into a geographic visualization tool. The map of our state populated on my center screen, turning black. A bright, aggressive red line traced his route from the downtown bridge, up the interstate, and terminating at one specific, hyper-localized exit. Exit 14, Greenwich Heights. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack my sternum. Greenwich Heights. The upscale, manicured, aggressively wealthy suburban enclave 30 miles north of the city. The exact neighborhood where Zaid's ex-girlfriend, Laura, owns a luxury townhouse. Laura, the woman he dated for 3 years before me. The woman who wore tennis skirts to brunch and drove a white Range Rover. The woman whose name had almost ended our relationship when we were engaged, because I caught him searching her Instagram from a burner account. She's a ghost, Miriam, he had hissed at me 2 years ago, standing in our kitchen, his face flushed with defensive rage as I held his phone up. Why are you looking at old ghosts? I haven't spoken to her in 5 years. I was curious what happened to her dog. That's it. You're acting insane. You blocked her on everything, I had whispered, tears streaming down my face back then. Why do you need a burner account to look at a blocked ex? Because you're paranoid, he had screamed, slamming his fist onto the granite counter. I chose you. I married you. Stop trying to sabotage this with your insecurities. I had apologized. I had actually cried and begged him to forgive me for violating his privacy. And now, staring at the aggressive red node glowing on my monitor at exit 14, I realized that my insecurity wasn't paranoia. It was an alarm bell I had forcibly disconnected. He hadn't been grinding for a Q1 promotion. He hadn't been surviving on office coffee. For the last 6 months, twice a week, my husband had been driving 30 miles north to sleep with his ex-girlfriend, spoofing his location to keep his little wife waiting at home with a warm plate of chicken piccata. I didn't call him. I didn't send a frantic, emotionally devastated, "Where are you?" text. That is what a victim does. That is what someone who wants to negotiate does. I am not a negotiator. I am a developer. And it was time to execute a hard system shutdown. I spent the next 6 hours physically dismantling our shared existence. I walked upstairs to his massive walk-in closet. I didn't fold his clothes. I grabbed his $3,000 Tom Ford suits by the hangers and dragged them out, the silk linings dragging across the carpet. I threw his Armani dress shirts, his cashmere sweaters, his Italian leather loafers, and his meticulously curated tie collection into heavy black garbage bags. I dragged them all downstairs. I popped the trunk of his Audi, which was registered in my name, under my credit, because his debt-to-income ratio had been too high when we bought it. I hurled the bags into the cargo space. I went into the garage and dragged out his prized, custom-fitted Callaway golf clubs, tossing them violently on top of his designer clothes. By 4 p.m., his entire life was compressed into the trunk of a mid-size SUV. Then, I went back to my workstation. I exported the geographic data into a massive 24-inch by 36-inch high-resolution PDF. I printed it on my architectural plotter. It was a beautiful, terrifying heat map of his betrayal. The route from his office to Lara's bed, highlighted in a thick, undeniable undeniable, systemic red, with the dates and timestamps of all 48 trips framing the border like a ledger of his sins. I marched out to the driveway. I used my spare key fob to start the car. I left the engine running. I took the heavy-duty packing tape and mounted the enormous heat map directly over the center of his steering wheel, ensuring it was the absolute first thing his lying eyes would focus on when he opened the door. But a map wasn't enough. I needed him to understand the math. I took a thick black Sharpie and wrote a single, bold formula across the top of the itemized toll bill, taping it directly in the center of the map. Trust equals initial value, northbound tolls X48. Remaining trust equals 0.00. At 6:15 p.m., I locked the front door, walked onto the wraparound porch, and sat in the heavy wooden rocking chair. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long, bruised shadows across the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. The air was biting. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, resting my iPad on my lap. At exactly 6:30 p.m., an Uber pulled up to the curb. Zaid stepped out. He was wearing his navy blue suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his hair immaculately styled. He looked exhausted. He looked like a man who had just spent 10 hours grinding for the future of his family. He waved to the Uber driver, hoisted his leather briefcase, and turned toward the house. He stopped dead in his tracks on the sidewalk. His eyes locked onto his Audi. The engine was running. The headlights were off, but the exhaust was thick in the twilight. His brow furrowed in deep confusion. He looked up at the house, trying to spot me, but I was shrouded in the deep shadows of the porch. He walked slowly up the driveway. "Miriam," he called out, his voice echoing in the quiet street. "Babe, why is the car running?" I didn't make a sound. I just watched. He approached the driver's side door. He reached out, pulled the handle, and swung the door open. The interior dome light illuminated the cabin. I watched his posture shatter. It happened in slow motion. He froze, his hand still gripping the door handle. He stared at the steering wheel. I could see the exact microscopic second his brain processed the heat map. I could see the moment the math registered in his lying, corporate strategist mind. The briefcase slipped from his grip, hitting the asphalt with a sickening smack. He stumbled backward, as if the car had physically struck him. He brought both hands to his head, his chest heaving, his mouth opening and closing like a suffocating fish. He scrambled for his pockets. A second later, my iPhone vibrated on the table next to me. "Miriam," he screamed into the phone, turning in frantic circles in the driveway. "Miriam, answer the phone. What is this? Please, baby, answer me." I declined the call. He abandoned the car and sprinted up the porch steps. He reached for the heavy brass handle of the front door and yanked it. It didn't budge. He pounded his fists against the reinforced wood. "Miriam, open the door," he roared, the panic bleeding out of his voice, replaced by raw, primal terror. "Let me explain. You don't understand. It's not what it looks like. Open the goddamn door." "It's not what it looks like," I whispered to myself, shaking my head at the absolute cliché of his defense. I looked down at my iPad. I had administrative access to every piece of technology in our household. I opened our mobile device management software. Zaid had a secondary, emergency MacBook Pro in his briefcase, and his Audi had an integrated infotainment system synced to his accounts. Both were registered under my enterprise developer profile because I used them for beta testing my mobile applications. With a single, deliberate tap of my index finger, I bypassed his local permissions. I selected wipe device. I selected execute. Out in the driveway, the digital dashboard of his Audi suddenly flashed blindingly white, displaying a harsh progress bar before aggressively rebooting to factory settings. Inside his dropped briefcase, his laptop's motherboard was currently engaged in a total, unrecoverable data scrub. He saw the dashboard flash. He turned around, his eyes wide with horror as he realized what I was doing. "My work," he shrieked, sprinting back toward the briefcase. "Miriam, my Q1 files are on there. Stop. Stop it right now." I calmly raised my left wrist to my mouth. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. My voice was as cold and hollow as the empty side of my bed had been for the last 6 months. "Siri," I spoke clearly into my Apple Watch. "Lock the front door and revoke guest access for Zaid's iPhone. The smart bolt on the front door slammed completely shut, the mechanical clack echoing with a brutal finality through the quiet street. The keypad on the doorframe flashed red. His digital key was permanently disabled. He was locked out of his home, locked out of his devices, and locked out of his marriage. I stood up from the rocking chair. I finally stepped out of the shadows and walked over to the porch railing, looking down at the man I had promised to spend my life with. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, his immaculate suit ruined, tears streaming down his face. "Miriam," he begged, his voice cracking, pathetic and small. "Please. I love you." It meant nothing. She meant nothing. "Please don't do this. I have nowhere to go." "You have plenty of places to go, Zaid," I said, my voice dead level, carrying across the cold air. Just punch exit 14 into your newly formatted GPS. I'm sure Lara has room for your golf clubs. Before he could open his mouth to scream another lie, I turned around and walked back inside the house. I didn't look back. As I walked into the kitchen, I opened my phone and navigated to the group chat that contained Zaid, his mother, and his father. I didn't owe his family an explanation, but I refused to let him control the narrative. I typed out a single, precise message. Zaid has been working overtime on the northbound side of the bridge for 6 months. I've decided to let him relocate there permanently. His office is now the trunk of his SUV. Please don't ping me back. The connection has been terminated. I hit send. Then, I blocked all 3 of their numbers. Zaid is currently sitting in a brightly lit gas station parking lot at the northbound highway entrance, trying to figure out how a $5.50 toll fee ended his marriage, ruined his career, and left him homeless in the span of an afternoon. Meanwhile, I am sitting at my workstation with a hot cup of tea. I've already updated my LinkedIn status to managing director of my own life, and I currently have my 3D modeling software open, redesigning my new, entirely solo living floor plan. So, Reddit, I look at the empty closet, the silenced phone, and the absolute destruction I wrought on a man who swore he was building a future for us. And I have to ask, am I the monster here for completely annihilating his life without giving him a single chance to speak? Or did he get exactly what he deserved the moment his transponder crossed that bridge?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.